Palestinians say they would rather die hungry than accept a new US-backed Gaza aid system. And for the first time since 2012, the U.S. envoy Thomas Barrack raises the American flag at the Damascus ambassador's residence. And Trump says he warned Netanyahu against jeopardizing Iran nuclear talks. Palestinian residents have reported that Israeli settlers launched overnight attacks on the village of El Mughir near Ramallah, torching crops and escalating violence in the occupied West Bank. According to local sources and Wafa news agency, settlers also burned vehicles in the nearby village of Ramoun and vandalized homes with racist graffiti. The attacks followed another in Qaryot near Nablus, where homes were stoned and cars set ablaze. Violence by settlers has surged since the start of the Gaza war, with further settlement expansion under Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's right-wing government. Palestinians view the West Bank as the heart of a future state, while it remains under Israeli military occupation since 1967. Palestinians have said they would rather die hungry than face the humiliation of seeking food under a new aid distribution system introduced by the US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the GHF. Palestinians who walked several kilometers only to return empty-handed criticized the system's lack of safety and dignity. The GHF, supported by Israel and the U.S., claims it has distributed over 8,000 food boxes, equal to 462,000 meals, since Israel eased its blockade of Gaza last week. However, the UN and other aid organizations have boycotted the GHF, arguing it undermines the neutrality of humanitarian work by tying aid distribution to conflict parties. A U.S. State Department spokesperson dismissed criticisms as complaints about style. And more than 300 prominent British public figures, including actors, musicians and intellectuals, have signed an open letter demanding Prime Minister Keir Starmer end what they describe as the UK's complicity in the ongoing war in Gaza. And the letter, organized by the refugee charity Choose Love, features signatories such as actor Benedict Cumberbatch, singer and activist Annie Lennox, and broadcaster Gary Lineker. It criticizes the UK government's stance on Israel's actions in Gaza, calling for immediate intervention. You can't call it intolerable, yet do nothing, the letter states. Prime Minister, what will you choose? Complicity in war crimes or the courage to act? The Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza has reported that the Israeli military has issued an evacuation order for Al Auda hospital in Jabalia in northern Gaza. The ministry condemned the move as a violation of international humanitarian law and called on the international community to intervene and protect Gaza's collapsing health system. Al Auda is one of the new functioning hospitals in northern Gaza, which has faced relentless bombardment and severe shortages of medical supplies throughout the conflict. And Gaza's government media office has reported that at least 10 Palestinians were killed and more than 60 injured over the past 48 hours after Israeli forces opened fire on civilians trying to access aid from the US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. The incident occurred in Rafah, where disturbing footage showed desperate crowds rushing towards the aid distribution site, many forced to wait in cage lines. The aid mechanism, supported by the United States, has faced growing criticism from the UN officials and humanitarian organizations. Critics argue the system is inadequate and dangerous, saying Israel continues to obstruct trusted aid agencies capable of delivering life-saving assistance at scale. And workers were seen unloading sacks of humanitarian aid at Kerem Abu Salim crossing as preparations continue for the Gaza-bound deliveries. The operation comes amid growing international pressure following Israel's decision to lift an 11-week blockade on Gaza 10 days ago. And since then, aid has been allowed through limited channels, including the United Nations and the US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. According to the UN, Israel has approved roughly 800 truckloads of aid since deliveries resumed last week. And the UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food, Michael Fakhri, has condemned Israel's actions in Gaza, stating that they have pushed the enclave to the most dangerous stage of starvation with long-lasting consequences. Fakhri described the situation as genocide, starvation, a crime against humanity, and a gross violation of human rights. He accused Israel of deliberately inflicting maximum damage and high civilian casualties to advance its goal of occupying and annexing Gaza. Since October 2023, Israel has used starvation as a weapon, according to Fakhri, while blocking and attacking humanitarian aid convoys. He also highlighted that international courts recognize this crisis as a genocide, referencing to the ICC arrest warrants issued against Israeli leaders for the use of starvation as a war tactic. A United Nations warehouse in central Gaza has been stormed by desperate civilians as severe hunger continues to sweep the war-torn enclave. And according to the World Food Programme, 2 people were killed and several others injured in the chaos. The agency warned that unless food aid is significantly scaled up, similar outbreaks of violence are likely. The incident comes just 10 days after Israel lifted an 11-week blockade, allowing limited aid to flow through the UN and the US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. However, humanitarian groups say current deliveries remain far below the level needed to meet the urgent needs of Gaza's population. And the United Nations and its humanitarian partners have raised alarm over Israel's newly imposed military-controlled aid system in Gaza, saying it fails to meet urgent needs, undermines civilian dignity, and places lives at risk. And the UN team urged Israel to ensure humane treatment of civilians, allow unimpeded delivery of aid, and halt all forced displacement. They called for the regular and sustained aid flows through multiple crossings and emphasized that humanitarian partners, including the UNRWA, must be granted continuous access to provide not only supplies, but also vital services across the Gaza Strip. And the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs has described Gaza as the hungriest place on earth, with nearly 180,000 pallets of food and life-saving aid ready for immediate delivery. Spokesperson Jens Larke told UN News Agency that the aid is fully funded, cleared through customs, and could be moved into Gaza at scale right away. He warned that lives are being lost by the hour due to delays. The agency condemned Israel's closure of the Gaza crossing since March the 2nd, accusing it of deliberately starving 2.4 million Palestinians and pushing them to the edge of famine, while clearing the way for forced displacement. And for more analysis, we now move to Mark Summers in our newsroom. Hello, Mark.
Yes, thank you, Selma. Good evening, everyone. Right now, joined by Editor-in-Chief of Al-Ahram, who is Ashraf Al-Ashri. Thank you very much for being here with us on Qnews. So we have this new military organized US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. This is the mechanism for giving aid in Gaza, and it seems to have some problems. Is it meeting the urgent needs of people? Is it effective?
Of course, there are so many shortcomings and a lot of failures for this organization. There has been a statement that this is a suspicious foundation, and it's not meeting any of the Palestinian requirements, and there are a lot of shortcomings along the past 3 days since it started operating in the Gaza Strip. It's not providing the adequate amount of aid. The allocated centers in the Nord corridor and the Marash corridor are not helping the populations of the north. The population of the north is deprived because they have to walk for 30 kilometers a day to obtain this very limited food share. So this foundation is doomed to fail, and maybe if the negotiations that Witkoff is leading right now succeeds, this foundation will be cancelled, and we will go back for the distribution of aid through the UN bodies, including UNRWA. So the life of this foundation is doomed, and it won't last longer. It has already failed more than once, administration-wise and operation-wise.
Okay, and what impact has the 11-week blockade been having, and also this new military-controlled aid system? What effect is it having on the humanitarian situation in Gaza?
Of course, these are deteriorating, outrageous humanitarian situations, as 2 million people are being now starved to death, along with the Israeli shelling since the 18th of March. Netanyahu resumed the war on Gaza after he rejected to carry on with the rest of the ceasefire agreement. So the situation is deteriorating. 2 million people are being starved to death, with the complete halt of the humanitarian aid assistance, and now not adequate amounts are being distributed without a mechanism. It's affecting women, children, and the elderly, and all Palestinian civilians. Very limited volumes of aid that does not even meet the requirements of a 5-member family, a 5-individual family in Gaza. Also, Palestinians now are being sorted and selected to obtain any kind of aid, given the excuse of that any Hamas-affiliated people will not get any aid or food, and also now the entire population is facing this ghost of imminent death, and the Israeli public now also now are saying that the Israeli statements rather are saying bluntly that the war is to lead the Palestinian population out of Gaza. It is the goal of Netanyahu, and it will lead to the escalating tensions in the region and the ongoing war in Gaza.
Okay, well, let me ask you then, because it's a desperate situation, a terrible, horrific situation for the people of Gaza, and now there's a high number of casualties reported near to the distribution points of people desperately trying to get food, authorities firing into the crowds. Are there measures that could be put into place to ensure that it's more safe for the people of Gaza?
Unfortunately, this foundation and the relevant mechanisms for security and protection of aid distribution operations, especially that the aid is now limited only to 4 points or 4 centers in central Gaza and in the south. All the people of the north are deprived of these aid, and they really have to walk a very long distance to get this very limited share of aid. Now the Israeli side is saying that they are meeting their obligation to provide humanitarian aid, but at the meantime they are firing at people, and it's now only either starvation to death or evacuation. These limited amounts of aid are not nearly proportionate with the humanitarian need, which is deliberate by Netanyahu and the far-right officials in Israel. And it's only to portray an image in the Western media that they are working on aid distribution, but they do not nearly meet the need in Gaza. Also, the United States might announce in a few hours the conclusion of the negotiations with a 60-day truce to meet all the humanitarian needs of the Gaza population, and afterwards we might see comprehensive negotiations for a permanent ceasefire agreement as per to the Witkoff plan.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for coming on the program. Editor-in-Chief of Al Ahram, that's Ashraf Al-Asri. Thank you very much for being here with us, and we'll come back to you, Selma, in the studio.
Thank you, Mark. Spain, Ireland, Slovenia and Norway have jointly called for the full United Nations membership for the State of Palestine, describing it as a vital step towards achieving a two-state solution. In a joint statement, the countries reaffirmed their commitment to a viable Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. They urged the international community to support Palestine's recognition, the UN membership and a comprehensive peace agreement with Israel. They also emphasized the importance of the upcoming high-level conference in June the 17th, 2025 as a key opportunity to advance peace efforts and break the cycle of violence. At least 23 Palestinians have been killed and several others wounded in an Israeli airstrike on a home belonging to the Il-Qarinawi family in eastern Bureiji refugee camp, central Gaza. Additional casualties were reported in separate Israeli strikes, including the death of a man in the south of Qnews. Emergency crews also retrieved bodies from previous bombings in Abasan el-Kabira and Gaza City's Shujaiya neighborhood. One civilian was reportedly shot dead by Israeli forces near an aid center in southwestern Qnews. And for the first time since the embassy closed in 2012, the U.S. envoy for Syria, Thomas Sparrock, has raised the American flag over the ambassador's residence in Damascus. After months of limited engagement, the U.S. has rapidly strengthened relations with Syria's new administration. In mid-May, President Donald Trump met with Syria's new president, Ahmed al-Shara, in Riyadh, and the U.S. has since eased sanctions on the country. And we now turn to the press conference by the White House press secretary live.
Has their sensitive diplomatic or trade negotiations railroaded by activist judges? President Trump is in the process of rebalancing America's trading agreements with the entire world, bringing tens of billions of dollars in tariff revenues to our country, and finally ending the United States of America from being ripped off. These judges are threatening to undermine the credibility of the United States on the world stage. The administration has already filed an emergency motion for a stay pending appeal and an immediate administrative stay to strike down this egregious decision. But ultimately, the Supreme Court must put an end to this for the sake of our Constitution and our country. With Congress returning next week, it's critical that Senate Republicans maintain the momentum and quickly pass the One Big Beautiful Bill. The One Big Beautiful Bill will truly make America safe and prosperous. The One Big Beautiful Bill includes the largest border security investment ever. That's why the law enforcement groups are lining up to encourage its swift passage. The National Fraternal Order of Police, the largest police union in the country, just endorsed key provisions of the bill. The FOP president announced their strong support, saying the One Big Beautiful Bill Act is more than legislation. It is a promise kept to the public safety officers across the country and a bold step toward an economy that respects, rewards, and uplifts the people who keep it safe. And the National Border Patrol Council, which represents nearly 20,000 Border Patrol agents, hailed the legislation as well. The group's president said this legislation provides a once-in-a-generation investment in the border security of our great country and will make America safer. The One Big Beautiful Bill will guarantee we can permanently have the safest, strongest, and most secure immigration system in American history. I also want to take the opportunity to debunk some false claims that have been circulating in the press about this bill. The blatantly wrong claim that the One Big Beautiful Bill increases the deficit is based on the Congressional Budget Office and other scorekeepers who use shoddy assumptions and have historically been terrible at forecasting across Democrat and Republican administrations alike. For example, just before Congress enacted the original Trump tax cuts at the end of 2017, the same CBO projected that growth would average a mere 1.9% over the next 10 years. However, by 2019, actual growth had surged to 3.4% once the Trump tax cuts went into effect, exceeding the CBO forecast by nearly 2 full percentage points. The CBO's latest forecast makes the same anemic growth assumptions as they did in 2017, missing the impact of the One Big Beautiful Bill. The CBO assumes long-term GDP growth of an anemic 1.8%, and that is absurd. The American economy is going to boom like never before after the One Big Beautiful Bill is passed. The largest middle-class tax cut in history, massive deregulation, and the most aggressive domestic energy exploration ever will fuel small businesses, further boost private investment, increase workers' wages, and supercharge economic growth. The Council of Economic Advisors has factored in the effects of all these pro-growth policies and estimated in their own analysis that growth will average 3% in the long run after the One Big Beautiful Bill is passed, which is nearly double the ridiculous CBO projection. This higher growth would result in $4.1 trillion in additional revenue over the next 10 years. Between the common sense spending reforms contained in the One Big Beautiful Bill and the robust economic growth that will be generated as a result of it, there will be no increase to the deficit. The same analysis from the CEA shows just how this historic package will unleash prosperity and ignite a blue-collar boom across America. But if the radical Democrats get their way and the One Big Beautiful Bill does not pass, Americans will face a whopping $4 trillion tax hike. This is unacceptable to President Trump. President Trump will not allow Democrats to massively raise Americans' taxes. Senate Republicans must get this bill passed. Failure is not an option. The American people are counting on Republicans to deliver. In other news, despite all the doom casting from the media, Americans are growing more and more optimistic about the economy under this president. Consumer confidence surged in May with the biggest monthly jump in 4 years, smashing expectations. According to the release from the Consumer Confidence Index, the increase in confidence was broad-based across all age groups, income groups, and political affiliations. Our country is clearly heading in the right direction under President Trump's bold leadership. For the first time in history of Rasmussen polling, a majority of Americans believe the country is on the right track. It's unsurprising because the president is fulfilling the promises he made to the American people. Here in our new media seat today, we have the editor-in-chief of The Federalist, Molly Hemingway. The Federalist is led by Molly and Sean Davis and provides fearless journalism and coverage of politics and culture to millions of readers all over the world. Thank you for being here, Molly, and why don't you please kick us off?
Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you.
In the first Trump administration, there was an effort to stymie the
And we were live at the press conference of the White House with the press secretary talking about the beautiful bill for the security and investment and all the prosperity for the U.S. and being the new American dream. The U.S. President Donald Trump has said that he has warned Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu last week not to take any steps that might jeopardize ongoing nuclear negotiations with Iran. Trump told reporters he advised Netanyahu that such actions would be inappropriate, given how close the talks were to reaching a solution, though they cautioned that the situation could change quickly.
Next question, please.
Mr. President, just last on sanctions.
I did, yeah.
If Senate Republicans want to push
It's
forward.
not a warning. I said I don't think it's appropriate.
What exactly did you tell him?
And in the lush hills of the Karaburan near Turkey's Aegean coast, a beekeeper offers a unique form of natural healing, apitherapy, by having visitors inhale air directly from beehives. Ceylon's serene bee farm has become a seasonal retreat where guests spend days in cabins, breathing hive-filtered air for up to 3 hours daily. He claims the practice, rooted in traditional medicine, eases ailments such as migraines and respiratory conditions. Though not officially recognized by Turkey's government, apitherapy draws people like 69-year-old Ulku Osman and cancer survivor Sinai Ilham, who say the experience provides both psychological and physical relief. Each session costs around 5,000 lira, $128 per day, including accommodation and meals. And that brings us to the end of our news bulletin, and here's what we've been covering. Palestinians say they would rather die hungry than accept the new US-backed Gaza aid system. For the first time since 2012, the U.S. envoy Thomas Barrack raises the American flag at Damascus ambassador's residence. And Trump says he warned Netanyahu against jeopardizing Iran nuclear talks. This concludes our news bulletin for the hour, and don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEG to stay informed. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.